Well, as we've been talking about, advanced polls opened across Canada at noon today, and they're going to stay open for the next 3 days. In some locations, there have been some long lineups of people eager to cast a ballot, but some people may not be voting really for their preferred candidate. Strategic voting has been a hot topic in this election, and tomorrow, the group leading the push for Canadians to vote tactically to defeat the Conservatives is releasing its first round of specific recommendations. Leadnow will advise their supporters to vote either NDP or Liberal in up to 16 battleground ridings. But can the strategy work? Joining me from Toronto is Amara Possian. She's campaign manager for Leadnow's Vote Together campaign. And in Vancouver is Brian Breguet of the poll analysis website Too Close to Call. Good to see you both. This is something that people talk about and they think about and they don't know, does it make sense, doesn't it? So Amara, I'll start with you. The 16 ridings that you've targeted, are you going to tell people who to vote for, and why are you doing that?
So ultimately, it'll be up to the Leadnow community to decide. Right now, we have candidate recommendation processes running in 16 battleground ridings, and tomorrow we'll be announcing whether the vast majority of people in those ridings want us to actively unite the vote behind the candidate who can defeat the Conservative.
And so the recommendation would be go with this person or go with that person?
Yeah, there's a handful of ridings across the country where over 500 people have pledged to vote together, and where we have local polls that show that there's a clear candidate who can defeat the Conservative. So what we've asked our community of vote pledgers is whether they want to unite the vote behind that candidate, and if they say yes to backing the NDP or Liberal candidate, we'll get out the vote for the candidate.
Okay, so Brian Breguet, let me bring you in as someone who looks at these trends and how they sort of play out. Do you think it works?
No, I'm very skeptical of the effectiveness of those campaigns. I think it requires a lot of information, a lot of coordination by the voters, and I just don't see it really working really well.
You wrote a big list of places where you thought strategic voting could make a difference for Conservatives. Give me some idea of where that might be. Give me an example of where Conservatives would actually gain from it.
So, yeah, because we always forget that the Conservative can vote strategically as well, not only NDP and Liberals.
Of course.
I think the best example is the riding in Toronto of Olivia Chow, the Spadina-Fort York, where right now it's most likely a race between the Liberal and Olivia Chow from the NDP. And in this riding, the Conservative, they have no chance of winning. But given the Liberals, they're back up in the game and they might challenge Stephen Harper for first place, I could imagine some Tories voter who will want to split the left and vote NDP in this riding.
But from a principled point of view, and maybe I'll ask you this first, Brian, is it not more important to vote for the person or the candidate you actually believe in rather than trying to ponder what the outcome will be and how you could weigh it one way or another?
Well, I don't know. I don't have an ethical or moral problem with this. I do agree that personally I will vote for my first choice when I will vote later today. But, you know, if people want to make their choice to defeat somebody instead of voting for somebody else, I mean, who am I to judge, you know, what they base their decision on? I mean, you vote for who you want based on the reason you want, so.
Sure, okay. Amara Possian, do you have any sort of ethical or moral concerns around pushing this idea?
I mean, I think that voter preferences are clear in this election. Poll after poll is showing us that over 60% of people want change on October 19th. And the unfortunate reality is that our broken electoral system could distort our votes and give us another unjust Conservative majority. So I think that voting together is actually a way to assert our voter preferences in swing ridings where vote splitting might lead to a Conservative victory.
So give me an example tomorrow of one of these ridings and what difference you think your attempt to have a concerted effort or concerted vote will have.
So in Eglinton Lawrence, for example, home of our finance minister, we're asking we're asking vote pledgers if they'd like to unite behind the candidate who, in the polls, looks like he's best positioned to defeat the Conservatives, and right now that's the Liberal candidate. So if the majority of people in Eglinton Lawrence who've signed our pledge say yes, we'll be getting out the vote for the Liberal candidate in that riding.
Although I guess the other part of that, though, is that the person has to actually follow through with that, right? I mean, the onus is on the person to go ahead and do what they've told you they're going to do.
Yeah, and like Brian said, these efforts have historically not worked because of a lack of good local information and a lack of coordination. But the Vote Together campaign is different because we've crowdfunded for local polling across the country in these key swing ridings. So when people go to votetogether.ca and put in their postal code, they're able to see the conditions on the ground in their riding, and we're backing it up with solid ground game. So in addition to making community recommendations on the site and providing good local information, we actually have teams in the field who are canvassing and phoning, and will be reminding vote pledgers of their commitment and helping get them out to the polls on October 19th.
So Brian, what have we seen in the past with these kinds of attempts, and give me a sense of where they may have almost happened or where they've failed miserably?
Well, you know, in 2011, for instance, I think it literally backfired. They made the wrong recommendation in a couple of key ridings because it's not easy to identify the key ridings and who to vote for. I mean, so sometimes I'm very skeptical about those recommendations. And 2011 didn't work. They have improved by using local polling this time and using projection websites, easily available everywhere. But we have to remember that you still have margin of error for those polls. So when you say that we have a clear idea of who is the best candidate to defeat the conservative, I'm not so confident about this sometimes.
Well, even if it's not margin of error, what about all the people who are still struggling with who to vote for? So how would that how would that factor into people who are trying to vote strategically, Brian?
No, absolutely. And they're coming up with 16 recommendations. I mean, I look up at the riding where there was vote splitting between the NDP and Liberals, and the one right now, as of today, only 2/3 of them, of those ridings, were having vote splitting just 2 weeks ago. So, you know, as the voting intentions change, so do the ridings where the vote splitting occurs. So, again, how do we know that the recommendation today will be valid for 10 days later?
Well, that's a really good point, Amara, especially because there are so many people who are sort of deciding over the next number of days how they're going to land their vote, and yet you're going to put out these recommendations. Is that the best way to go about this? If the landscape could still change, things are moving quickly.
So in the vast majority of places across the country, in every single one of the 338 ridings where there's an election happening, when people go to votetogether.ca, they'll see historic results on new riding boundaries, any local polls that exist, and where parties stand on the issues. So for most people, Vote Together is a resource hub that gives them all of the local information that is publicly available so that they can make up their own minds on October 19th. In the handful of places where we are making recommendations, we're doing that responsibly. So this first phase of recommendations is in ridings where historically they've been two-way races. Our multiple rounds of local polling that has been funded by our community has shown a two-way race. And now we're taking it to our community to double check and say, is this what you want? There are at least 500 people who pledged to vote together in each of these ridings, and they're committed to the process. And so if they choose to make a recommendation tomorrow, then I'm sure that they're committed to continuing to get out the vote for those candidates. In places that are closer, in three-way races, in places where we don't have most recent local polling yet, we're recommending next week so that we can make a responsible choice as a community. Okay, thanks
to you both. I know this is something that people think about and wonder if it's the right choice for them, so I appreciate both of your opinions on this. Amara Possian of Leadnow and Brian Breguet of TooCloseToCall.com. Coming up on PNP, Justin Trudeau promises a tax cut for the middle class and says it would be one of the first priorities for a Liberal government. We're going to get the latest from the Liberal campaign, the CBC's Catherine Cullen, and that's straight ahead.